Right now, in this very moment, there's a seed buried so deep in the darkness of your life that you've convinced yourself it's dead. You've watered it with tears, you've spoken over it with prayers that felt like they evaporated into nothing, and you've waited so long that hope itself has started to feel like a cruel joke. But what if I told you that the very ground you're standing on, the ground that feels hard and unforgiving beneath your feet, is about to crack open with a harvest you never imagined possible? In the next 60 seconds, you're going to discover why your waiting season wasn't wasted, and why God has been working in the invisible realm while you've been wrestling in the visible one. Welcome, beloved. I'm so glad you're here today because this message isn't an accident. The fact that you clicked on this video, that you're hearing these words right now, is part of a divine appointment. God knew you needed to hear this today. If you're new to Pray to Begin channel, I want to personally invite you to hit that subscribe button and turn on those notifications, because we're building a community of believers who understand that faith isn't just about Sunday morning. It's about every single moment of breakthrough, every season of testing, and every testimony that's being written in real time. Before we go any further, I want you to do something powerful with me right now. Type these 2 words in the comments, I receive, just those 2 words, I receive. Because when you declare it, when you speak it out, you're opening your spirit to everything God is about to pour into your life. You're telling the universe, you're telling heaven, you're telling every opposing force that you're ready to accept what God has already prepared for you. So go ahead, pause for just a second, type I receive in the comments, and let's step into this message together. You know, there's something profoundly painful about standing in a wilderness season when everyone around you seems to be living in their promised land. You scroll through your phone and see the promotions, the engagements, the Barbies, the businesses launching, the dreams coming true, and you're standing there in your own life wondering if God even remembers your address. You've been praying the same prayers for so long that you've memorized the cracks in your ceiling from all those nights you've lain awake asking God when it's going to be your turn. The question that haunts you in the quiet moments isn't if God can do it. You've seen him do it for others. The question that keeps you up at night is, will he do it for me? Let me tell you something that's going to shift your entire perspective. Your wilderness isn't a punishment. Your wilderness isn't evidence that God has forgotten you. Your wilderness is a womb. It's the hidden place where the most extraordinary transformation happens, where God is doing surgery on your character, expanding your capacity, and preparing you for a blessing so big that the current version of you couldn't even carry it without breaking. The Bible is filled with wilderness stories, and here's what most people miss. The wilderness is never the end of the story. It's always the middle chapter between the promise and the manifestation. Think about this with me for a moment. In Genesis chapter 30, we meet a woman named Rachel who was barren, while her sister Leah kept having child after child. Can you imagine the agony of watching someone else live out your dream, especially when that someone is in your own house? Rachel's pain was so deep that she cried out to Jacob, "Give me children or I'll die." That's the cry of someone in a wilderness season. That's the prayer of someone who feels like their waiting is killing them. But here's what we need to understand about Rachel's story and about your story. Genesis 30 verse 22 says, "Then God remembered Rachel. He listened to her and enabled her to conceive." Notice that word, remembered. God remembered Rachel, not because he had forgotten her, but because his timing had finally aligned with his purpose. See, God operates outside of our timeline. 2 Peter chapter 3 verse 8 reminds us, "But do not forget this one thing, dear friends, with the Lord a day is like 1,000 years, and 1,000 years are like a day." What feels like forever to you is just a breath in eternity's calendar. God wasn't late for Rachel, and he's not late for you. Your barren season, whatever it looks like, whether it's your bank account, your relationships, your health, your ministry, your career, that barren season is speaking a language that only faith can interpret. It's saying something is coming that requires a miracle. Because let's be honest, if you could have made it happen on your own, you would have done it by now. You would have forced it, manipulated it, or figured out some way to bring it to pass through your own strength. But God intentionally allows certain things to remain impossible in your human capacity, so that when it finally happens, there's no question about who gets the glory. Let me take you to another powerful scripture. Isaiah 43 verse 19 says, "See, I am doing a new thing, now it springs up. Do you not perceive it? I'm making a way in the wilderness and streams in the wasteland. Read that again slowly. God doesn't just bring you out of the wilderness. He makes a way in the wilderness. He creates streams in the wasteland, which means your breakthrough doesn't require you to leave where you are right now. Your breakthrough is going to spring up right in the middle of what feels like the driest season of your life. There's a woman I once heard about who had been trying to have a baby for 8 years. 8 long years of negative pregnancy tests, of well-meaning people asking when she was going to have children, of attending baby showers with a smile on her face and tears behind her eyes. She told me that she had reached a point where she stopped praying for a baby because the disappointment was more painful than the unfulfilled desire. She said, "I surrendered it to God, not because I was strong, but because I was tired." And it was in that season of surrender, in that moment when she finally released her white-knuckled grip on how she thought it should happen, that God moved. Within 6 months, she was pregnant. Not because God was testing her faith by making her wait, but because there were things in her heart, in her marriage, in her spiritual maturity, that needed to develop before she could handle the blessing. This is what Proverbs 18 verse 12 teaches us. Before a downfall the heart is haughty, but humility comes before honor. The wilderness humbles us. It strips away our pride, our self-sufficiency, our need to be in control. And in that humbling, God creates space for honor, for blessing, for the abundance that was always meant to be ours, but that we weren't ready to steward. Here's something else I need you to understand about wilderness seasons. They're not just about what you're waiting to receive, they're about who you're becoming while you wait. God is more interested in your character than your comfort. He's more concerned with your transformation than your timeline. Because the truth is, you can get a blessing before you're ready and lose it faster than you got it. How many lottery winners have we seen go bankrupt within years? How many people have gotten the relationship they begged for only to realize they weren't emotionally healthy enough to sustain it? How many ministries have exploded with growth only to implode because the leader's character couldn't support the platform? Romans 5 verses 3 through 4 tells us, "Not only so, but we also glory in our sufferings, because we know that suffering produces perseverance. Perseverance, character, and character, hope." Your wilderness is producing something in you that the promised land requires. The patience you're developing right now, the faith you're building, the dependence on God you're learning, these aren't just nice spiritual qualities. They're the foundation that will hold your blessing when it arrives. I want to talk to you about Abraham for a moment, because his story is one of the most profound examples of trusting God's timing we have in Scripture. In Genesis chapter 12, God promises Abraham that he's going to make him into a great nation. Abraham is 75 years old when he receives this promise. Can you imagine being 75 and hearing God say, "I'm going to give you descendants as numerous as the stars"? Now, we know the rest of the story. Abraham doesn't have his promised son Isaac until he's 100 years old. That's 25 years of waiting, 25 years of looking at the promise, looking at his circumstances, and wondering how God was going to bridge the gap between the two. And here's what gets me about Abraham's story. He made mistakes during the waiting. He tried to help God out by having Ishmael through Hagar. He doubted, he questioned, he stumbled. But even in his imperfection, even in his humanity, God's promise remained sure. Because God's promises aren't dependent on your perfect performance. They're anchored in his perfect character. Hebrews 6 verses 17 through 18 says, "Because God wanted to make the unchanging nature of his purpose very clear to the heirs of what was promised, he confirmed it with an oath." God did this so that, by two unchangeable things in which it is impossible for God to lie, we who have fled to take hold of the hope set before us may be greatly encouraged. Did you catch that? It is impossible for God to lie. Your wilderness season doesn't change God's word over your life. Your mistakes don't cancel his promises. Your waiting doesn't mean he's wavering. Every single day that you wake up and you're still in the wilderness, you're one day closer to your breakthrough. Every prayer that feels like it's bouncing off the ceiling is actually accumulating in heaven's courts. Revelation 5 verse 8 describes our prayers as golden bowls of incense before God's throne. Your prayers aren't disappearing into nothing. They're rising, they're being collected, they're building toward a moment when heaven says, "Now, release it now." Let me give you a practical understanding of how this works. When a farmer plants a seed, what happens? The seed goes into the ground, and for a long time you see absolutely nothing. If you didn't know better, you'd think the seed had died. You'd think the farmer wasted his time, but underneath the surface, in the darkness, in the hiddenness, that seed is breaking open. It's sending roots down deep into the soil. It's drawing nutrients. It's establishing a foundation. And then, when the time is right, when the roots are strong enough, when the foundation is secure enough, suddenly you see a sprout break through the surface. And that sprout becomes a plant, and that plant produces fruit, and that fruit contains seeds for the next harvest. Your life works the same way. What you're calling barren, God is calling preparation. What you're calling delay, God is calling development. What you're calling a wilderness, God is calling a womb. Jesus himself said in John 12 verse 24, "Very truly I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds. Death precedes multiplication. Burial precedes resurrection. Your wilderness precedes your abundance." Now I know some of you are thinking, "But I've been waiting so long, I'm tired, I'm discouraged, I don't know if I can hold on anymore." And I want to speak directly to that weariness because it's real and it's valid. Galatians 6 verse 9 says, "Let us not become weary in doing good, for at the proper time we will reap a harvest if we do not give up." At the proper time, not at your time, not when you think it should happen. But at the proper time, which is the exact moment when everything you've been through, everything you've learned, everything God has developed in you aligns perfectly with what He's about to release to you. I want you to think about the Israelites in the wilderness for a moment. They wandered for 40 years, and during that time their shoes didn't wear out, their clothes didn't fall apart. God provided manna every single morning. He led them with a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. What am I saying? Even in the wilderness, God sustains you. Even in the waiting, He provides. You might not have everything you want, but look around at your life right now. You have what you need. You're still here, you're still standing, you're still breathing. That's not luck. That's divine preservation. God is keeping you through this season because He has every intention of bringing you out of it. Psalm 37 verses 4 through 5 gives us the blueprint. Take delight in the Lord, and He will give you the desires of your heart. Commit your way to the Lord, trust in Him, and He will do this. Notice the order. First, delight in the Lord, not in the blessing, not in the promise, not in the breakthrough, in the Lord Himself. When you shift your focus from what God can give you to who God is, something powerful happens in your spirit. The waiting becomes worship. The wilderness becomes a place of intimate encounter with God. And in that intimacy, He begins to shape your desires to align with His will, and then He fulfills them. Here's another layer to this truth that I think is so important. Sometimes God delays the blessing to protect you from a premature delivery. You know how when a baby is born too early, they have to go to the NICU because their lungs aren't fully developed, their immune system isn't strong enough, their little bodies aren't ready for the outside world. The same is true spiritually. Some blessings, if they came when you first prayed for them, would actually harm you because you weren't ready. The relationship you begged for 3 years ago, if you had gotten it then, might have destroyed you because you were still carrying unhealed trauma. The business opportunity you prayed for 5 years ago, if it had opened then, might have bankrupted you because you didn't have the wisdom you have now. The platform you asked for last year, if God had given it to you then, might have exposed you to attacks and pressure you weren't spiritually mature enough to handle. God's delays are protection. His timing is perfect, not just for the blessing itself, but for your ability to receive it, steward it, and sustain it. Ecclesiastes 3 verse 11 says, "He has made everything beautiful in its time." Not early, not late, but in its time. The word beautiful there means appropriate, fitting, perfectly suited. God is making your breakthrough beautiful, which means He's timing it to fit perfectly with where you're going, not where you've been. If you've been with me this far, would you do me a favor? Hit that like button. It helps this message reach more people who need to hear that their wilderness has an expiration date. And as you do that, I want to remind you that you're not alone in this. There's a community of believers here who are standing in faith with you, who understand what it's like to trust God when you can't see the way forward. Let me share something with you that might shift how you see your current situation. Matthew 6 verse 33 says, "But seek first His kingdom and His righteousness, and all these things will be given to you as well." Notice that Jesus doesn't say, "Seek first these things and then worry about the kingdom." He says, "Seek first the kingdom." When you prioritize your relationship with God, When you chase after his presence instead of his presence, he takes responsibility for adding everything else to your life. That means your job isn't to figure out how to make it happen. Your job is to stay connected to the source of all blessings, and he handles the delivery. I think about Hannah in 1 Samuel chapter 1. She was barren, and the pain of her barrenness was compounded by the fact that her husband's other wife, Peninnah, kept provoking her and taunting her about having children. Hannah was so distressed that she went to the temple and prayed with such intensity that the priest Eli thought she was drunk. 1 Samuel 1 verse 10 says, "In her deep anguish Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly." This wasn't a casual prayer. This was a desperate, gut-wrenching cry to God. And here's what Hannah did that changed everything. She made a vow. She said, "Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant but give her a son, then I will give him to the Lord for all the days of his life." Hannah surrendered the very thing she was praying for. She said, "God, if you give me this blessing, I'm going to give it back to you." And God heard her prayer. He opened her womb, and she gave birth to Samuel, who became one of the greatest prophets in Israel's history. What's the lesson? Sometimes the breakthrough comes when we surrender control, when we stop clutching and start offering, when we move from demanding to dedicating. Your wilderness might be the place where God is asking you, will you trust me with this? Will you surrender it fully? Will you believe that my plan for it is better than yours? Jeremiah 29 verse 11 is probably one of the most quoted verses in the Bible, but I want you to hear it fresh today. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." God says, "I know the plans I have for you, not I'm figuring it out, not I'm hoping it works out. But I know, past tense, it's already established." The blueprint for your life, including this wilderness season and everything that comes after it, is already drawn up in heaven. Your job is to trust the architect. You know what else happens in the wilderness? You discover what you're really made of. You find out if your faith is real or just religious routine. You learn whether you love God for who he is or just for what he does. Moses spent 40 years in the wilderness before God called him from the burning bush to deliver Israel. David was anointed as king, but then spent years running from Saul in the wilderness before he took the throne. Joseph was sold into slavery, falsely accused, and thrown into prison for years before he became second in command in Egypt. Jesus himself was led by the Spirit into the wilderness for 40 days to be tempted by the devil before he began his public ministry. Do you see the pattern? The wilderness is where champions are forged. It's where leaders are developed. It's where God takes ordinary people and prepares them for extraordinary assignments. Your wilderness isn't random, it's strategic. God handpicked this season for you because he knows what's on the other side of it, and he knows you need to go through it to be ready for it. Psalm 126 verses 5 through 6 says, "Those who sow with tears will reap with songs of joy. Those who go out weeping, carrying seed to sow, will return with songs of joy, carrying sheaves with them." Every tear you've cried in this wilderness is a seed. Every prayer you've prayed is a seed. Every moment you chose to worship God anyway, to trust him anyway, to keep going anyway, those are seeds. And there's a harvest coming that's going to be so abundant, so overwhelming, so beyond what you prayed for, that you're going to weep again. But this time, you'll be weeping with joy instead of pain. I need you to hear this loud and clear. Your story isn't over. This chapter is hard, but it's not the conclusion. God is writing something so beautiful with your life that future generations are going to point back to this wilderness season and say, that's where it all turned around. That's where God showed up. That's where the impossible became possible. Your testimony is being formed right now in the fire of this waiting season. 2 Corinthians 4 verses 17 through 18 tells us, "For our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal." What you're going through right now, as heavy as it feels, as long as it's lasted, is temporary. But the glory it's producing, the transformation it's creating, the testimony it's building, that's eternal. So here's what I want you to do. Right now, in the middle of your wilderness, I want you to start praising God for the breakthrough that's coming. I want you to thank Him for what you haven't seen yet. I want you to declare that you trust His timing even when it doesn't make sense to your natural mind. Because faith isn't about seeing it first. Faith is about believing it's coming and acting like it's already done. Your wilderness season is preparing you for overflow. The barrenness you're experiencing is about to give way to blessing that's so abundant you won't have room enough to contain it. God is about to do something in your life that silences every doubt, answers every question, and proves that He is faithful to complete what He started in you. Before we close, I want you to type one more phrase in the comments. Type, blessed and ready, because that's what you are. You're blessed by God's promise over your life, and you're ready to receive everything He's about to release. Type it right now, blessed and ready. Listen, beloved, here's what you need to lock into your spirit from this message. Your wilderness is not your final destination. It's your preparation station. God hasn't forgotten you. He's been fashioning you. Every tear, every trial, every moment of trusting Him when you couldn't trace Him has been building something in you that the blessing requires. If this message has encouraged you, if it's reminded you to trust God's timing, I need you to share this video with someone you know who's in their own wilderness season right now. Send it to that friend who's been waiting, that family member who's been believing, that coworker who needs to hear that their breakthrough is coming. And make sure you subscribe to Pray to Begin channel and hit that notification bell so you don't miss another message of hope and faith. Remember, your barren season is temporary, but your blessed season is coming, and it's going to be permanent. Keep trusting, keep believing, keep standing. God is about to turn your wilderness into a testimony that brings Him glory and brings you into the fullness of everything He promised. Until next time, stay rooted in faith, stay anchored in hope, and know that God is working behind the scenes on your behalf. Be blessed, beloved.